Okay, so today I'll be explaining the maritime supply chain, which is the absurdly complicated international architecture that makes our modern world function. The maritime supply chain is simply the movement of cargo between two destinations by the ocean or an inland waterway. These oceans are the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Arctic, as well as inland waterways, famously including the Rhine, a big old river in Germany. Basically, if I put a container on a ship and send it to Japan, I participated in the global maritime supply chain. To move that cargo, you've got to have a lot of moving parts. You have freight forwarders, port terminal operators, and logisticians all making it possible to ship a Cadbury cream egg from Britain to Uganda. It's frankly magical that modern humanity has been able to create a supply chain this large and this complicated. We can break down the maritime supply chain into three key parts: the ports, the hinterlands, and the sea. The sea is the defining feature of the maritime supply chain. Without the sea, it would just be the land supply chain, and supply chain nerds like me would be deprived of another of life's little pleasures. Without the sea, humanity would also be deprived of the most efficient way to transport goods on Earth. Per ton of cargo, transportation by ship is more fuel efficient, cost efficient, and time efficient than by land or by air. Unless a very entrepreneurial Studio Ghibli character bootstraps a cargo balloon, ocean liners aren't going anywhere. In fact, the importance of ocean liners just keeps going up. Demand for foreign products increases every single year, from finished products like iPhones and Honda Elements to raw materials like cobalt, rubber, and fertilizer. Demand remains constant even as risks mount from a changing geopolitical order. Wars and natural disasters aren't going to stop international trade, neither will tariffs. Where there is money to be made, there are brave people who will trade. Worst case scenario, you get boarded by pirates and fed to sharks, but the reward is money, and lots of it. So, breaking it down, you have the hinterland, the land based area connected to a port, and includes transport hubs and logistics systems that move goods from a port to their final destination. You have to get all your precious cargo off the boat and onto land in order to get the PS5 in the consumer's hands, as the old adage says. This involves rail lines, trucks, small barges, and cranes to lift the large cargo containers off of heavy cargo ships. Hinterland performance comes down to infrastructure, logistics, and labor. The more of those ingredients you have, the more cargo can be moved from port to purchaser, and thus more money. Win win. Lastly, you got the port, the most essential part of the maritime industry besides the boat. If shipping lanes are the lines, then each port is a node. You got to have a place to park your ship once you're done carrying cargo, and the port acts as the gateway to a nation's market. Because so much capital moves through ports, it's common for them to be near urban metropolitan centers. Just think of Seattle, Cebu, or Chicago. Each of these cities has access to a port with flows to the outside world. Not only this, ports often link to rail terminals and airports, maximizing transportation. There is money to be made getting products from A to B. Ports connect together to make global spider webs of capital, and each one is connected in a different way. There are liner networks, tramp networks, and feeder networks. Liners offer regularly scheduled services on fixed routes. These are pretty regular shipments between ports running on schedules. Tramp services, on the other hand, are irregular and unscheduled. Generally, they are contracted by an agency trying to get through a port. Feeder networks are the smaller hops that connect smaller ports to larger hubs. And just getting further into feeder networks are just bunny hops. You can find a lot of them in Europe. They generally make up ports in the same region or between neighboring countries. These small hops are important because they connect the ports that are too close to incentivize those regular container shipments with the giant cargo ships with the giant containers. Now, let's talk about the people on the ground making your iPhone arrive on schedule. Two important fellas are the freight forwarders and the port terminal operators. Freight forwarders organize the shipments of goods. They make sure all the shipping routes are efficient and that all the documents are in order. Port terminal operators, on the other hand, own or lease the port space and manage the land based logistics to ensure goods reach their final destination efficiently. These guys are generally landlubbers, and you can find them in comfy warehouses or offices in the ports or interlands. Combine them with other logisticians, and you have the brain, coordinating the crazy complex world of international maritime trade. Now that we've gone over the key parts of the maritime supply chain, doesn't it sort of kind of look like the arteries in a human body, with resources being pumped from one end to the other? Like human cardiovascular systems, this stuff is important, as in, without it, we'd be dead. The maritime supply chain sustains the global economy without a doubt. 80% of global supply is transported by sea, and we saw how badly it went when COVID disrupted the system. Thus, the famous federal money printer. Bottom line is that this stuff is delicate, and if you break it, you fix it. A resilient supply chain is essential to a functional system because nobody buys local. Your phone is made in China, your shoes are made in Vietnam. You drink coffee grown in Guatemala but roasted in New Jersey. Without a resilient supply chain, all that cool stuff goes away tomorrow. Therefore, maintenance of this delicate network is super important. If you want to get into this industry, it's on you to put on your hard hat and make sure that our modern world keeps humming along. Or if you're not in the industry like me, you can watch from the background and pray the professionals keep a handle on things long enough for my Lego Death Star to ship. Operating the maritime supply chain means that consistency is key, but wrenches can be thrown into the mix. Bad weather, typhoons, oversaturated ports from too much demand, all these things can impact the time and cost of shipping, and each dollar lost is another dollar added to the end product. Efficiency is king. So you got to manage problems, and that's why I kind of put the Five Nights at Freddy's background. I feel like maritime supply chain is like managing a bunch of animatronics, I guess. The chain must be managed. Spice must flow. Routes need to be carefully planned, observed, monitored, and rerouted if there is a wrench. This is generally the job of logisticians and shipping corporations to calculate. Costs are balanced between stakeholders in the web, like external suppliers, distributors, and of course the consumer. Speaking of consumers, they really are demanding quite a lot these days. Global demand continues to increase, and with it comes increases in flexibility, reliability, and efficiency, or at least one should hope. Corporations hedge these growing consumer demands with AI and digitalization. This generally is called the Amazon effect. There's a constant pressure to optimize efficiency through data capture. That means data on weather patterns, fuel consumption, whole loss from cookie cutter sharks, and 100 other metrics. Corpos think that it's best left to the machine, but I still find comfort in pure pen and paper mathematics from a human being. There's also a major push for sustainability in the industry. Corporations want to lower their fuel emissions to get around environmental fines. They also want to lower fuel emissions because fuel is generally pretty expensive, and every ounce of fuel saved means an ounce less of fuel to lug around. It's sort of like the fuel to weight ratio that rocket ships have, except instead of carrying astronauts, you're carrying Nike flip flops. This incentivizes corporations to find alternative fuel sources and engineer shipping efficiencies, all the while reaping the PR windfall of a green future. Other areas of focus include ship recycling, where ships beach themselves like whales on Pakistan's shoreline before being sold for scrap, and reducing acoustic pollution, which negatively impacts the real whale migrations that happen every single day. The maritime supply chain faces a couple challenges. We talked about pirates before, but there are also adverse weather conditions, criminals, smuggling, and the dreaded congestion. And when I say criminals, I don't just mean pirates, I mean drug smugglers. There are also problems with ships wedging themselves in the Suez Canal, which is never a good sign. But returning to the issue of piracy, it remains a pretty big problem near areas along the coast of West Africa as well as the Strait of Malacca. Though incidents have decreased recently, between January and September 2024, the International Maritime Bureau reported 79 incidents of piracy and 111 crew members taken hostage. That's not a small number, and as long as large cargo vessels move, there will be those willing to risk boarding for a big score. Environmental problems also continue to be the biggest elephant in the room. Droughts, flooding, and extreme weather events damage port infrastructure and make the locks of key canals unworkable. This is true for the Panama Canal, which requires a lake to refill its locks. If the lake runs low on water, restrictions have to be made on Panama's crossings, meaning ships have to go all the way around South America, adding weeks to trips. Climate disruptions also risk $90 billion per year globally for the maritime shipping. That's not chump change. Last but not least, you got bottlenecks. What's got the world in a chokehold right now are maritime choke points, maritime routes which are of supreme importance and which are liable to go kaput at any given moment. Remember, there are an infinite number of routes, but only a few choke points in the world, like for instance the Strait of Hormuz. But the Strait of Hormuz is only one of many choke points. There's in fact an entire belt running around the circumference of the Earth, which is made up of similar choke points. It includes the Panama Canal, the Strait of Malacca, and the Suez Canal. This is the circum-equatorial corridor, and it handles the bulk of maritime traffic, connecting major markets from East Asia to Western Europe. If you were to cut off a single one of these choke points, you would have major problems, such as the near paralysis of global shipping. Looking at you, Ever Given. Choke points are obligatory points of passage that are strategically important. They are usually wedged between two pieces of land, like the Suez Canal, or two angry neighbors, like Iran and the rest of the Gulf states. These routes support major commercial flows and connect smaller markets together. If these choke points were cut off, major supplies of coltan, coal, iron, oil, fertilizer, and other consumer products would not get to their end consumer. You can break choke points down into primary choke points and secondary choke points. Primary choke points are usually limited by space and are driven by their cost-effective geographic position, cutting down travel time between ports significantly. Disrupting one would seriously impair global trade. These connectors along major oceans and seas include the Panama Canal, Suez Canal, Strait of Malacca, and Bab el-Mandeb as stated prior. Secondary choke points aren't a significant time saver, but important resources in commercial shipping pass through them. Examples include the Strait of Hormuz. Oil, fertilizer, and natural gas pass through the strait. The Bosporus Strait is another secondary choke point, where Russian gas and Ukrainian wheat goes to the global market. Expanding on Russia and Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine turned the Black Sea into a conflict zone, severely impacting global food security and stressing the Bosphorus. Ukraine is a major global exporter of wheat, corn, barley, and sunflower oil, with exports dropping significantly in 2022 until the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Ukraine makes up 10% of global wheat, 15% of global corn and barley, and 50% of global sunflower oil production, all of this transiting through the Bosphorus. Then you got the Houthis. These guys are known for both stressing the global supply chain and stressing our favorite niche shipping YouTuber. Shout out to What's Going On with Shipping, Stay Frosty King. Following October 7th and the Israeli Palestinian War, the Houthis began hijacking vessels in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea in solidarity with Hamas and Hezbollah. This forced ships to reroute around the Cape of Good Hope, leading to a 50% increase in shipping time and millions of dollars in extra costs per trip. American naval assets have been largely ineffective at resecuring the region. Iran is the other end of the hydraulic press crushing global shipping. The Strait of Hormuz carries 25% of the world's total oil and 20% of total liquid natural gas. It is the primary access point for Gulf states, including the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran, to the wider world. And without it, key inputs for nearly every part of global production and food suffers. This depresses production and could lead to a global depression. All the while, Iran extracts Bitcoin tolls while Greek ships try to run the blockade. Thanks, Donald. The South China Sea is probably the last and most critical maritime route, handling one third of all global shipping. Beijing asserts sovereignty over the area in accordance with the Nine Dash Line. This generally messes with the exclusive economic zones of Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia, pissing off ASEAN. In order to secure the sea, China uses gray zone tactics like civilian ship swarming, water cannons, and setting up bases on the tiny, uninhabited Spratly Islands. The Taiwan Strait, which lies between Taiwan and China, alone transited $2.45 trillion worth of goods in 2022. It is also a key shipping point for semiconductors and the most advanced computer chips, which are fueling the AI race, an industry on which the entire global economy is balancing. I'm not gonna lie, it's looking pretty bleak. How do we solve this mess? Who knows? Maybe we can figure that out together in the next video. Global cooperation would be a good start. Maybe a couple intergovernmental agencies, port authorities working together, and, God forbid, diplomacy. William Spaniel at Lines on Maps has a lot of great videos regarding warfare and bargaining frictions, so look him up if you want to save the world. Yeah, and happy sailing! None of this video is AI generated, by the way, so if you want to learn more about how the world functions from a flesh and blood human being, shoot me a like and a follow, and smash that like button. Oh my god.